a statutory meeting for the plan of subdivision. There's also a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted for this property, but the statutory meeting is for the subdivision, and then the statutory meeting for the zoning application is considered at planning committee. Next slide, please. So most of us have started to get used to Zoom over this past year. We've turned a lot of our meetings into virtual meetings. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Zoom, we'll go over a little bit of protocol to make you better aware. So right now you're all on mute and you do not have the ability to unmute yourself. Only the host of the meeting will be able to do so. When we turn to the question and answer period, you can raise your hand, and that's at the bottom right-hand side of your screen beside the leave button. So you'll click on reactions, and then there's a option to raise your hand. So raise your hand and it'll put you in a queue for questions, and one of us will unmute you so you'll be able to speak into the microphone. Next slide. So to start off our meeting, we're going to do a little bit of introductions. Councillor Gower is here today. He'll say a few words. My name's Laurel McCrate. I'm the planner on the file. I believe I have corresponded with a few, if not all of you already. The applicant is Mattamy Homes, and we have several representatives from Mattamy here, as well as their consultants from FOTEN. We have Nico Church and Lisa Della Rosa, as well as a representative from CGH Transportation, who is Andrew Hart. So next I'll turn it over to Councillor Gower to say a few words. Next slide. Oh, I lied. We are going to go through the agenda first. So we will turn it over soon to Councillor Gower. Then I'll take over and go through the planning process and very high level remarks. FOTEN will do a presentation on their development proposal, so the specifics of the application. We'll turn it over to your questions. So you can write them in the chat if you don't want to forget them, and then raise your hand at the end and we'll get to them. And then we'll do closing remarks. Now it's Councillor Gower's turn.
Thanks, Laurel, and welcome everyone. Thanks for being here this evening. This is a really interesting development application because of the land that it's on. There's a heritage stone house on the property, which we're going to talk a bit about as we go through today. And then next door to it, there's an old estate lot with a very large, you'd almost call it not quite a mansion, but a very, very large residence that formerly was used as a headquarters for Faces magazine. So two interesting buildings on the existing lots. I'm really pleased to see that Mattamy does intend to keep the two stone buildings. There's one that is the Harton family home that dated back to, I believe it was 1886 for the larger stone house, and then the smaller stone cottage goes even older than that, but they're both 19th century homes. They don't have official heritage designation, but the city has recognized them for potential designation at a future date. But anyhow, I am glad to see that the intention is to keep these homes. We've had a fair amount of comments and questions about this file already from residents, and I see some familiar names in the participant list of people who've already contacted us about this. So I hope tonight is an opportunity for you to ask questions, to get more information, and to get some answers for things that you might be concerned about. The other thing I wanted to say was just this whole Fairwinds area, this whole area kind of southwest of Canadian Tire Center. It's kind of amazing to think that the Fairwinds community development started 12 or 13 years ago. And I would say we're really only at the midpoint of that development. It's just incredible the time it takes to build out a large neighborhood. So although for some people who might have moved into the neighborhood a dozen years ago, it seems like the construction's been going on ever since. We're still in the early stages of the build of this whole area. So this is one of several development applications, and it's an important one. It's one of the bigger ones. So I'm looking forward to the presentation from FOTEN and Mattamy today, and hearing the questions and comments from residents who've joined us. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. So I'll take it to go through the planning process for everybody and highlight the types of applications and take you through some of the city's policies. Next slide, please. So this is a statutory declaration I have to read according to the Planning Act, so just bear with me really quickly. This is a statutory public meeting for a plan of subdivision within the city of Ottawa as required to be held under section 51, subsection 20, subsection B of the Planning Act. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the city of Ottawa in respect of the proposed plan of subdivision, you must make a written request to Laurel McCrate at the City of Ottawa Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Department, 110 Laurier Avenue West, Ottawa, Ontario, K1P 1J1. Many of you have emailed me. That is also sufficient, and my email will be up at the end of the presentation for you to take down as well if you haven't already contacted me. Rest assured, I do still receive mail. There are people who go into the office, and if you are mailing me any type of correspondence, it's scanned and sent to me, so I will still see that as well. Next slide. So what is a plan of subdivision? A plan of subdivision essentially divides parcels into lots and blocks for development. It will create walkway blocks, service infrastructure, parks, commercial blocks. If a school is necessary, it'll create a block for a school and various types of streets. So while we go through the subdivision process, we're working towards what's called draft approval, and this will establish the general layout for the subdivision, and it'll also set out conditions that the developer must fulfill. So when we're going through draft approval, we're basically approving everything conceptually. If the subdivision receives draft approval, we move on to registration, which is where we get into the nitty-gritty details specifically for engineering and financial requirements. At the end of that, we work towards registration where the subdivision agreement is created. Next slide. A little bit of context. I'm sure all of you are aware where we are in the world. 1837 and 1849 Maple Grove Road. It is north of Maple Grove Road, just west of Huntmar Drive. Many of you can see where you live on this screen. So if we move a little further west, there is some more vacant land. And as Councillor Gower indicated, there are several applications in for current plans of subdivisions as well. Next slide. So the official plan is the overall guiding policy document for the city. And this property here, highlighted in blue, is designated as general urban. And this is pretty much the biggest designation the city has. It covers most of our land in our current official plan. It predominantly designates lands for low-rise development, anything up to 4 stories. So if an applicant is looking to go greater than 4 stories in the general urban designation, they would require an official plan amendment if they didn't meet other policies set out in the plan. This application is doing low-rise development in the form of townhomes that are less than 4 stories, so therefore they comply with the official plan designation of general urban area. Next slide, please. So there's some other plans that also apply to this property. The Canada West Secondary Plan. This is just a snapshot of the plan, but the hatch lines on the outside kind of show the general area of it, excuse me, and it goes up to the highway to the north, and it also includes the auto park there on Palladium. We're in a residential area here, which is designated Area D. This plan doesn't specify necessarily the maximum building heights. It refers back to the official plan for guidance. So on the previous slide, I said how this subject property is designated general urban area. So it's saying that this land could develop up to 4 stories. So we meet the Canada West Secondary Plan as well. Next slide. The last plan that applies here is the Canada West Concept Plan, which gets into more design-oriented details and guidelines for this plan, for this subject property, excuse me. We're highlighted there in B, and we're residential area B, where it states that a range of dwelling types are permitted, including townhouses, which is what this proposal is for. Next slide. So the zoning bylaw of the city sets out how each parcel can develop and what uses are permitted on the site. Because we're 2 properties here, there are 2 zones. So the zone on the left, DR1, stands for Development Reserve Subzone 1. And that just basically says it's reserved for some form of development. The property on the right is a general mixed use zone, and the numbers that you, subzone 16, the numbers that you see there in brackets, 1470, that's an exception zone, where that could also state different provisions that apply to a property, as well as any uses that are not permitted or any extra uses that are permitted. And then the H10 means that's subject to a height cap of 10 meters. Next slide, please. So now that Mattamy has come in for their plan of subdivision, not all of the zoning on the property matches what they'd like to do, and specifically Development Reserve 1, you can't do much on that. So just really quickly, they're looking to rezone most of the property to residential third density zone. I won't get into the details. If we have questions, we can do those at the end. There's some site-specific exceptions they're requesting, as well as for the stone house. They're looking to retain the stone house, as Councillor Gower indicated at the beginning of the meeting, to permit storage and a place of assembly. And as well for the Patrick Harton house, they're looking to expand the list of permitted uses. Next slide. So now we'll turn it over to the team at FOTEN, who will take you through the specifics of their proposal.
Thank you, Laurel. Just to introduce the team that is here to speak today and that will be answering questions later. My name is Nico Church. I'm a planner with FOTEN. With me is my colleague Lisa Della Rosa, also a planner, a senior planner with FOTEN. We also have a few representatives from Mattamy Homes, Olivia Hughes, Connor Gallagher, and Kevin Murphy. And we also have Andrew Hart of CGH Transportation. They are the transportation engineers for this development. So next slide, please. Next slide again. Thank you. So Mattamy is proposing to develop the site with about 90 three-story townhomes. There's going to be two different types of products. 28 of the townhomes will be regular townhomes on 18-foot wide lots. And the balance, so 62 of them will be back-to-back townhomes. The site will be accessed by two road loops, two crescents from Maple Grove Road to the south. So there's going to be a total of 4 different vehicle access points to the residential subdivision. And it's important to note that these roadways will be private. They'll be collectively owned by the development's residents through a joint use and maintenance agreement. So what this means is that the roads will be privately managed and maintained by the development. So for instance, snow clearing will be most likely contracted out to a management company, as well as monitoring some visitor parking that is on the site. The development will also jointly own an existing stone cottage that is in the northeast portion of the site. So that stone cottage is proposed to be used for storage and also as a meeting room for the development's residents. The Patrick Harton house, which is the stone house that's much closer to Maple Grove Road, that is also going to be retained. Mattamy is planning on selling it at a later date. And it's to be used either as a residential purpose or a small scale commercial purpose. Just moving on to the next slide, please. So this is a proposed siting plan that gives an idea of what the building footprints will look like on the site. So the townhouses will be grouped in blocks of 4 to 12 units. The back-to-back townhouses will be located on blocks that are largely internal to the site, whereas the townhomes on 18-foot wide lots that actually have a rear yard, those will be located on the eastern and western edges of the site, where they abut existing residential lots. Next slide, please. So just looking at the two different types of products, number one is the townhouses on 18-foot wide lots. Again, approximately 28 units located on the eastern and western edges of the site in blocks of 4 to 8 units. And they will abut existing residential lots to the east and the west primarily, and a little bit to the north. These will be 3 stories in height. And at the very minimum will feature a rear yard setback of 7 meters. That's what's proposed right now. And in many cases, especially in the northeast portion of the site, you might notice that the site widens a little bit. And in those cases, the rear yard setback goes up by a few meters. It's important to note, there's a couple of renderings here. Mattamy is currently working with their architect to prepare some models that will be specific to the site. So the renderings that you see here, that's not exactly what the development will look like, but it gives you an idea of the massing of these types of blocks. Next slide, please. So next, moving on to the back-to-back townhomes, again, located on blocks that are largely internal to the site, and they will make up approximately 62 units in blocks of 8 to 12 units. When I say back-to-back, it means that there's no rear yard, so they're vertically attached at the rear as well. And the private amenity space for these units will be in the form of a second-story balcony. Again, these will also be 3 stories in height. And again, the same comment that I made with respect to the renderings applies here. May not look exactly like what you can see right now. Exact renderings will be developed further down the road. Moving on to the next slide, please. So in terms of the requested zoning amendments, Laurel touched upon it a little bit, but I'll go through it again. As part of a plan of subdivision application, we're also submitting a zoning bylaw amendment application. So the majority of the subject lands we're proposing to rezone to, and I apologize, this is a bit of a mouthful, residential third density subzone YY urban exception 2317. So that's the R3 YY 2317 designation that you see there. This is a designation that has been used for other Mattamy sites in the city. So it's not new in the city of Ottawa. A site-specific zoning will be sought for the stone cottage to permit the uses that Mattamy wants to have there for the future development's residents. So once again, to be used for storage as well as a meeting space for the development's residents. Lastly, the Patrick Harton House, again, the heritage house closer to Maple Grove, that existing zoning will be revised. Firstly, to permit a reduced rear yard setback from the block of back-to-back townhouses units to the north. And also we're seeking to expand the list of permitted uses. So right now, the list of permitted uses for the Patrick Harton House is actually quite limited. And we're looking to find opportunities for the space to actually be utilized. And because it's a heritage property, sometimes we do need to expand the net a little bit to find other uses that might be, that would still be very appropriate for the site, but that give it a few more chances to find a suitable tenant. So the permitted uses that we're seeking for the Patrick Harton House are a detached dwelling, so it could be residential. And in terms of the commercial uses, we would have bank, office, retail store, personal service business. That can be services like spas, haircutting studios, medical facility, so a dentist's office or a doctor's office could be located here, an artist studio, as well as a restaurant, which includes possibly a cafe use. Moving on to the next slide, please. So just in terms of the summary of what we've talked about, again, the proposed development of the site is for approximately 90 ground-oriented low-rise townhomes. The official plan and the Canada West concept plan, so the applicable policy, they both consider townhouses to be appropriate for this area. The low-rise building height as well is in conformity with the Canada West secondary plan, as it is low-rise, it's 3 stories, that is permitted in the general urban area. The development also seeks to retain 2 existing heritage buildings. As Councillor Gower mentioned, 2 buildings that were built in the 1800s. And actually the rezoning will permit additional uses for one of the heritage buildings, thereby increasing the chances that it will actually be utilized. And lastly, the proposed zoning is, it aligns with other similar developments around the city. And it will permit an efficient, appropriate residential density on the subject lands. So for all these reasons, we believe that this development represents good planning and is in the public interest. So at this time, I believe it's a time for a question and answer session. But we do thank you for your time, and we look forward to answering any questions or concerns that you may have.
Thanks, Nico. Quickly, just before we get into the question and answers, just to give everyone an idea of where we are in the process and what happens next. So even though there's a deadline for commenting, which was last week, we still accept comments throughout the process. So if you haven't submitted your comments yet, please do so as soon as you can, but rest assured they're still considered even if you submit them, 2 months down the road. We'd always like to hear from you. Once we have all the comments from the external agencies as well as internal department, we work with FOTEN and Mattamy to resolve any of the issues that have been brought up through the circulation process. Once the city is satisfied that the issues have been resolved satisfactorily, we'll move on to what's called draft plan approval and set out the conditions that I talked about a couple slides ago. Basically setting out everything that the developer would have to satisfy in order to see registration. I would prepare a report that goes out to the councillor as well as the applicant with a recommendation for approval or refusal. And we need concurrence from Councillor Gower as well as the applicant in order to proceed. A notice of decision is sent to all those who have commented. So once you have commented with me and I have your contact information, you'll be notified of the decision for the approval or refusal of the draft plan of subdivision. Next slide, please. The other application was the zoning bylaw amendment. Again, please submit your comments whenever you have a chance. You can submit them for both applications in one piece of correspondence. Once we've established draft approval, one of the conditions is that the site has to be rezoned appropriately to match the layout and all the uses proposed. So again, I prepare a report. This one, however, goes to what's called planning committee, which is a committee made up of 10 members of council, where they would consider planning services recommendation and they would send their own recommendation on to city council. So for the rezoning, city staff make a recommendation and it's the councillors who have the authority to approve or refuse it. Once it's done at council, the city council will enact the bylaw, and a notice of bylaw passing is sent out to owners who have commented, as well as all of those owners within 120 meters. And then there's a 20-day appeal period. If nobody appeals, then the bylaw comes into effect. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll move into the question and answer period. The next slide for wrap up, it'll have my contact information and how you can stay involved. So we can go there next. We can open it up to, actually, yeah, let's just leave it on that in case anyone wants to do that while they're here. So just meeting sign in. You don't necessarily have to do it. I've been taking notes who's here. There's a comment sheet if you'd like to provide it to me. If you don't want to fill out a comment sheet, an email or a handwritten or typed written letter is good as well. The link to the application materials are there in the third bullet on what we call the development application search tool. And once we're ready to go to planning committee, everyone will be notified and we encourage you to attend. And then my contact information is at the bottom there with my email. Okay, so I think we're ready now to open up to question and answer. So again, if you do have questions, please use the raise hand function at the bottom under reactions, and we'll unmute you so you can ask your question. Councillor Gower, do you have any remarks or do you have questions? Do you want to start it off?
I have a question because I know sometimes it takes a little bit for people to find the hand up button, but can someone explain the status of the two stone buildings as it relates to heritage? Because I've seen a lot of comments on Facebook asking about, is this a heritage building? Do they have heritage status? And I didn't explain it very well in my opening either. So might be a good point of clarification. What is the heritage status of these two stone buildings?
Laurel, would you like me to speak to that?
Sure.
Okay, so basically the status of the heritage buildings from a legal perspective right now, they have no status. They're what's called the they are on what is called the heritage register. So the city has a pretty wide list of properties that it may have a heritage interest in. These two homes, the Patrick Harton House and the Stone Cottage to the northeast, are both on the heritage register. So what this does is, if ever there is a demolition permit application that is submitted for that property, then the city has, I believe it's 60 days to look at the property and see if they have any interest in retaining that building and seeking a formal heritage designation. So that is where they're at now. They don't enjoy any formal designation, but were we to do anything to the properties, the city would take a close look at it.
Right, and as we heard, there's no intention for Mattamy to demolish or change the buildings in any way. They're keeping them on the site. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, a few more hands have come up. The first one being Kathleen. Oh. Oh my goodness.
I think Kathleen is on mute.
Yeah, that's probably me or Braden.
Okay, sorry about that. Am I on mute still?
Can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I back directly on the Heritage House, which is the carriage house, whatever they're called, the storage one you want to do. I paid a premium for my land when I bought with Mattamy, and I had major issues with my foundation, which Mattamy would have good documents of that for about 13 years. They came and fixed my foundation. So dug up the backyard 3 times, dug up my basement once. It cost a bundle. I'm afraid that all this construction in the back will cause damage to my foundation, number one. And number two, will they keep an eye out on those heritage buildings or whatever they're not designated yet, but will they keep an eye out on those buildings to make sure that they don't crumble? They're important to me. It's my peace and quiet in my backyard, which will be destroyed.
Absolutely. Maybe both Nico and I can answer this. So it's great that you have all of this documented with Mattamy, and it sounds like you have a long-standing history. So when we go through draft approval and we set out conditions and we're reviewing the plans after the grading and drainage plans for draft approval, we're also reviewing to ensure that there aren't any negative effects on neighboring property owners. If blasting is required, I'm not saying blasting is required, but for example, if blasting, and that's fine, I'm just saying if blasting was required, there's certain conditions that are put into draft approval to ensure that blasting doesn't cause damage to neighboring properties. We have to review geotechnical documents to ensure that the soils can sustain this type of development as well as neighboring properties. So the city does their own review. When Mattamy takes over and does construction, we have city inspectors who are out on site. So if there are problems, we turn to our inspections team. And Mattamy also relies on their contractors as well to ensure that everything's going smoothly. I don't know, Nico, if you want to, or anyone from Mattamy want to weigh in on after approval, what would happen?
Yeah, for sure. So any construction activities, Mattamy would retain a firm to ensure that to ensure that construction activities adhere to all the best standards and practices, and that would include some vibration monitoring. So they would be making sure that they'd keep an eye, be inspecting the houses nearby, and I'm sure that they would also have a great interest in making sure that the heritage buildings are also protected.
I do.
For sure, and I think a lot of us do. So I think certainly as part of the approvals process and as part of Mattamy's own interest, they will be keeping a close eye on things like vibration and any effects on nearby foundations. So I don't know if anyone from Mattamy wanted to add to that, but certainly they would want to keep a close eye on any sorts of construction activities, including the actual construction, the site works like blasting. For sure, they would be keeping an eye on all of that with pretty specific monitoring.
Okay, thanks for your question, Kathleen. If you have any more, just raise your hand again. Okay, next we have Poonam. But I have.
Hi, good evening. I live right across where a development will take place. My question is, will there be a road exactly right in front of my home? Because that will cause, traffic that will be coming in and going in, like safety issues. And I just want to know what the position is. It gives me a fair idea, but I'm not very precisely sure if my home is going to face right a street in front of my home. And I know it's a 3-story home. I also wanted to know how tall, is it going to be 25 feet tall? Is it going to be taller than the stone building, taller than the other homes that are right across it? Or is it going to be in par with the current community height for the other homes?
Nico, I'll turn that over to you.
Sure. So I do know, I'm just looking at the draft plan of subdivision right now, and it doesn't show the lotting across the street. So I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly if your house is across from one of the accesses. If you like, you can feel free to maybe send Laurel your specific address, and Laurel can flip the email to us, and we can have a close look at that and let you know where exactly the proposed streets would align. In terms of the building heights of the 3-story townhomes, I've looked at the elevations, and again, these are draft elevations. I would hazard a guess as to around 11 to 12 meters. Would anyone from Mattamy, Connor, Olivia, Kevin, have you guys taken a bit of a closer look at the elevations for this site for specific building height?
We just need to know who's going to answer that so we can unmute. Oh no, they have unmuting abilities, I think. Olivia, Connor, Kevin, no, they don't. Anybody?
I think Connor raised his hand, so I don't know if you.
Okay, Braden, unmute.
Sure. So I don't have the exact dimensions right in front of me, and I can certainly get back to you after, but typically the townhomes would be around 9 meters. Like 3 stories is generally an 8 foot, 8 foot story. So 3 stories, so around 24 feet plus the roof. So it would be around 30 feet or about 9 meters. The back-to-backs are a little bit taller, but they'd be pretty similar to the other ones in Fairwinds. I think there's some further west on Maple Grove. So if you take a walk and see, they'd be very comparable. I think they're around 12 meters, but if we have your contact afterwards, we can get you the exact height.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions for now, or?
I just wanted to know, will there be will they leave or reduce the size of the sidewalk that's currently there? And I know the plans show about roughly 3.8 meters setback from the road to where the building would be. And will there be any sort of like divider, like a buffer? I know there's a buffer in the back, but the plan has no buffer in the front. Anything done to make increase the curb appeal, because there's a beautiful stone building and then there are these really tall homes? Will there be anything done to make them look more prettier or add some sort of a community or curb appeal to these homes? like landscaping?
I can go ahead and answer that one, Laurel. It's Lisa here. And Mattamy can jump in, but the elevations on the sides of the houses are treated as corner yards. So they do have sort of the appeal that a front yard would. So even though the houses are siding onto Maple Grove, they will react like a front yard with, it appears to be some porches and such that wrap on the sides. There is going to be where there is the sidewalk, and you will have sort of side yards for people, whether they fence them or not. Typically, I don't know whether Mattamy permits the fencing to go all the way down the side, or if they sort of ask the people to stop at the corner of their backyard to allow for that greenness. But at the end of the day, those are treated like front yards, which would mimic what's happening on the other side of the street.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Poonam. Okay, over to Erin, please.
Hi, we basically had some similar questions as to the last lady. We're building a brand new home, which is still under construction. So our first comment would be any kind of feedback we want to get from you. We don't have a mailing address for another 4 months to get the information to us. So could you email anything back to us at present? We're building a brand new Tamarack across the street, so we're still under construction. Would be the first question. Again, like the last lady had mentioned, we have concerns basically to Nico and to the other people. These places, we do not know where the street areas are coming out to cross the street. And after paying nearly $1 million for a house, we have the concern of you're calling them frontage, but there still could be a concern of noise because although they're a stacked townhouse, it's like having an apartment building across from you. And we would hope that there's already some sort of like buffering there already that's vegetation. Are they leaving that? The other thing is, where again are these streets coming out from us across for noise? For us basically having like lights coming through our front window of our house down the road. The other question would be them joining in, like we're just going through a lot of construction, and when the builder comes in and starts paving and setting down our front doorstep and stuff like that, we want to make sure they're constantly not digging out to add in, because we have the electrical box and the bell box on our front lawn at present, so we don't want constant construction happening. We want to sort of get into our house and not have them digging our lawn up or anything. I guess would be some of the questions we have at this point. Yeah.
And the usage of it.
Oh, the other thing my husband mentioned is the usage too. Are these going to be owned, or are these going to be rentals, as in a condo corp, as to who will be across the street living across from us basically?
Thanks, Erin. I'll take the first one for notification. I know I've been in contact with you already, so I have your email address. Everything will be done through email, provided that's your preferred method of communication. Obviously, doing everything right now through email is much preferred. So I have your email. Rest assured, you'll be notified of any updates, or of if there are any other future meetings, such as planning committee. I'll notify you through email, so you don't have to worry about not having a mailing address. That's totally fine. For the rest of your questions, I'll turn it over to Foten and Mattamy there, because they're more on their proposal.
Sure. There are a few questions and comments there, so I'll try to make sure I touch on everything, and if I've missed anything, feel free to follow up on that. Yeah, again, in terms of the side accesses, again, I don't have the exact lotting on the other side of the road, and I don't have your address either. One thing that I can say is with 4 different side accesses, any vehicles driving to and from the site will be spread out between those 4 accesses. And actually, Andrew Hart from CGH, I was wondering if you might be able to provide a little bit of comment on maybe the volumes that might be expected at those different accesses.
Definitely. We're looking at it was around 90 units, I think, overall in this. It's not a huge amount of traffic overall. And so if you're probably looking at about 20 to 30 vehicles in a peak hour is what we normally assess. So outside of the peak hour, it's going to be a significantly lower volume than that, but you're looking at like less than 10 vehicles exiting per one of those accesses. And this is, probably what in comparable to what 15 driveways that could be opposite if it was like single family homes. So like in any other area of Fairwinds, it would be kind of comparable to that. So yeah, we are focused on the 4 spots, but you still get the kind of the glare from any type of turning movements with normal residential driveways. So let me know if you want more information, but hopefully I've covered that one off for now.
Well, it's about glare coming through our front window of our house. If we align with that street across from us, what are you going to do about that? Because when we asked the builder, they said they didn't know that there was anything designated. And all of a sudden, a week ago, we only found out a sign went up to say Mattamy was building there. We weren't aware what was going on with it when we bought. And we're not there. We have to go out weekly and watch it. We don't live in the vicinity of that area. We're way far away.
We're a house across the street.
Yeah.
From the transportation side, we don't, I don't consider it abnormal to any other type of site plan. Or as I said, the 15 driveways is still gonna probably represent, if it was a normal house, it's probably 2 to 3 cars per house, given the area. That's still a number of headlights and glares. So I think it's a common issue in any type of residential area. I can understand if you'll respectfully disagree with me on that, but that's where we assessed it from a transportation side, at least.
Aaron, it's Laurel here, and same with Poonam. Perhaps you guys can email me if you are agreeable to have me share your addresses with Mattamy and Foten. Perhaps we can get a better idea of what you're facing without knowing your address. And the same thing for me. I know I had asked you your address. Without knowing exactly where they lie, it's kind of difficult to answer those questions. When other people who currently live on Maple Grove there.
Laurel, we're right across the road. The parking lot that was Tamarack's parking lot, there's 1866 and 1868. We're 1866. It's 2 brand new homes. You can't miss it. We're in the stages of building and we're not closing till roughly September. So we're directly across the road. The other concern my husband mentioned was if people are at home working more and stuff with the blasting, because our house, they did blast a bit to do the basement and we're on rock for vibration, as the other lady mentioned too, if people are running servers or electronic equipment or anything like that, because the insurance doesn't cover if something gets out of control like that. If they're going to notify people when they're blasting and stuff too.
And the work hours.
And their work hours are of a concern too.
Yeah, absolutely. Nope, for sure. I understand that concern. Maybe someone from Mattamy, I don't know if you know yet, and sometimes they don't, whether or not blasting is required. It's not something we necessarily know maybe this early on. Mattamy or Foten, do you have any idea if you'll be blasting at this site?
Maybe I can, they figure that one out, or the response for those work hours and noise and for blasting, the contractor will be doing notices and advise you ahead of time. That's typical operation. I think other people in the area probably would remember Maple Grove going under some of this construction activity, and they received notices. And all work hours are generally by the bylaw. And if they do work outside of normal daytime hours, they do supply that notice, and it usually goes through the counselor's office. So that would be another way of communication as well as approval. So those are some of the actual construction activities.
I know they had to blast our basement 8 to 10 feet down. We were told there was quite a bit of rock where we are. And it was shale. Yeah.
So if blasting is required, I think I mentioned earlier, there are specific conditions that we would put in draft approval where Mattamy is required to do, and Nico mentioned this as well, vibration monitoring, 75 meters within a blast site. It's also done by provincial requirements. So the province of
Okay.
Ontario sets out very strict guidelines that all municipalities must adhere to. So we'll put conditions in draft approval if blasting is required. And then you are notified by the contractor when they're looking to do it. You have the right to say no if you don't want them to enter in your home or go on your property, but then they aren't liable if anything happens. So if blasting is required and a contractor does approach you, we always suggest to let them monitor for any vibration impacts.
Okay.
Just one, I know you had one more question for Foten. Have we established ownership for the property yet, whether it will be rentals or condo?
Yeah, it'll be condo. They'll be freehold townhomes. They're not rentals.
Okay, so they're owned then.
Yep.
Is this a condo corp as well then?
It will be, yes.
It will be, okay.
Tell them on the heritage front. It is heritage because our family.
Yeah, my husband's just mentioning our family's heritage falls back to the Bradley Richardsons are our family. So we're moving back to family homestead.
We all know. That was our property.
So we're keeping a close eye with things, but our biggest concern is basically what's happening across the road. And like I know the other gentleman mentioned that it's when they do all the sound testing and environmental testing, that it's just as if you were a house across from a house. But the way I look at it, coming from a residential commercial real estate background, same with my husband around large family businesses in the city, I look at those as being an apartment building to me, and you having all these streets accessing across the road. So I'm hoping if we mention all this now, that it's not going to fall by the wayside later, and the councillor is going to keep an eye on all the goings on of this. But when they build, there'll be no turning back, as well as blasting. We will be in the first year of our warranty that we pay for with our builder too. So like we would definitely let somebody come by our house, but then where does that leave us with our builder if across the vibration causes problems to our foundation and our builder didn't? Who takes up the argument on that in the first year when we're under the builder's warranty? There's a whole bunch of if and buts. It's a very gray area, basically.
Yeah, and I understand that the process can be a little bit daunting and frustrating, but that's what we're here for. So you can reach out to me at any time, and then if things get approved, we move to construction, and you have concerns, you can obviously call 311, and we can settle any issues that you have. If you have any other questions,
to see landscaping going, I guess final question, we'd still like to see landscaping going across the road too, as a bit of a buffer. Like there's already a hedge line going across there. Can they not keep that and stuff like that? It just makes the area look better.
Absolutely. So they have submitted a tree conservation report, and as part of draft approval, when we move into the more detailed plans, we would be looking at their landscaping plan there as well that will detail the specific type of plantings that they are proposing. So we would have our foresters and our environmental planners review the landscaping plan just to ensure that the species would survive and they meet our tree planting guidelines as well. So that will be looked at.
My husband's just mentioning here that the vegetation that's across there is probably from many years back. It's sort of heritage in a sense there too, like that, the vegetation, because it's all old lilacs from a very long time ago. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we'll be taking a look at that as well. So Erin, if you have any more questions, just raise your hand and
we're good for now. Otherwise, I'll email you.
Perfect. Thank you, Erin. Just one general question that will probably come up some point in time. If you are approved, is there a timeline for construction, and when would it start? How long would it last? If you can give any of the residents details on that, Mattamy/Foten, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll let Mattamy answer that. I think they'll have a better idea of their timeline.
I think we're still working through our final schedule, but at this point, we do expect to be starting construction for servicing these lots probably next summer. And then hoping to start home building towards the end of next year, and then maybe have the first people moving in the following summer in 2023. But we'll confirm that as we get closer to through the process.
Great. Thank you, Connor. Okay, Allie, your turn.
Okay, thank you for having this meeting. I share this concerns about the possible blasting and monitoring the basements as well. My property backs on to more towards the northeast side of the lot. And I'm just wondering if the residents, especially who back on to that fence line, would there be a way that we could get a direct contact to somebody for the vibration monitoring? I just know I've had this experience before with my parents where it was a fight tooth and nail to get anybody to respond, to get anybody to provide the vibration equipment, and so on and so forth. And so having a direct contact with a name and a number or an email address would probably put people at ease that if their foundation is at risk, and they have someone that is for sure 100% in charge of that problem, that might make them feel a little bit better to feel that their property is being monitored and that the damage won't get out of control.
So to respond to that question, and Connor, feel free to jump in if you need to correct anything. But as I understand it, those people will actually come to you, to any properties that are within a certain radius of the site works where blasting or hoe ramming would be required. They would send a letter out to you requesting entry to the property to set up an inspection, to set up some monitoring systems. So again, you shouldn't have to do that work. Those people will come to you to set everything up.
No, I understand that. That's what I'm saying, though. That's, I guess there's a little bit of trust issue there where, you know, it's supposed to be protocol that we are contacted, but the likelihood of that happening is possibly slim. And so we as residents might want to have something on our side and not just be waiting around to be contacted, so that we have somebody to go to and say, hey, we need to be contacted. We need somebody here.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
What I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Definitely agree with you. We can have somebody have a defined point of contact when it comes to construction. So if there's any concerns, issues, because sometimes you can get issues of false alarms with the vibration monitoring equipment, and it can cause some concern with people. So absolutely, we can set up a defined point of contact to address any of those concerns.
Okay, great. That would be great. I just have one other question in the layout of the lot. It's actually very opposite of the basement issues and the foundations. I'm wondering, there, you said there's about 90 to 100 families that are going to be moving into this area, and the two lots together are completely fenced in. And so there's not really any point to get out of that area if you live there, other than by a car and walking around the corner. So my thinking is this is a young family oriented neighborhood, and they are going to want their kids to be able to have access to a park. And I've lived here for 10 years. I know the area very well. In order for them, and like I say, I back onto the northeast end of this property, or this area, and for them to have to walk around, that might be a bit dangerous for some young kids to be able to access any kind of a park or play area. They really don't have anything, whereas the rest of us that live in this neighborhood, there are multiple parks in various areas, so that the children really don't have to walk very far to be able to go and play, and not have to cross a busy street in order to go and play. And we all know that Maple Grove is increasingly more and more busy, and the speed monitoring thing doesn't really do anything. and so the cars are moving quite fast. The children would not be able to access the water park that's across the street and down the way a little bit. I'm wondering if Mattamy or whoever would consider possibly changing up the proposal and including a park, because the area is completely fenced in. My thinking is, it's very crammed between the stone cottage and the northeast corner of the entire lot. Would Mattamy consider maybe foregoing those 4 homes and possibly putting a park for those residents to be able to access, so that their children don't have to cross busy streets and have to walk quite a distance or jump fences and cut through other people's yards in order to be able to go and play at a park and be outside, because a lot of those residents don't really have much of a yard. A park to them is going to be very attractive in the way of, oh, my child only has to go 2 doors down and doesn't have to cross a busy street in order to be able to go play in a park. There's also a beautiful, very large old tree in the northeast corner that I did notice on the tree conservation that it's marked to be taken down. And it would, with all of these houses and tall homes and whatnot going in, it might be nice to see the plan as a whole change a little bit by foregoing those four units in the back northeast corner to provide a park for the residents for the safety of their children, and then also save a tree and have a park that actually has a tree in this neighborhood, because all of our parks have very young trees and they really don't provide any shade at all. Like, what are the chances? I guess maybe my question is, that's the way I see it, as, possibly an improvement to the area of the houses, and rather than pack in near to 100, maybe forego 4 of them, so that the residents have a bit of a park and a nice area for their children to play. And would Mattamy even consider changing their plan?
Boten or Mattamy, up to you guys.
I think just jumping in on my end, I can certainly appreciate the challenges that a fenced-in property presents, and the fact that there are developments on existing developments to the north, east, and west, where you can't just punch through a new pathway. I can certainly appreciate that there are some challenges with that. I would say, just looking at the community, there are quite a few sidewalks. So I would say, in comparison to several other homes, you would probably need some some walking either on Maple Grove or another street to reach the nearest park, probably with some parental supervision. So I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think this would be an exception to what is being developed here or anywhere else in the city. With respect to whether or not Mattamy would consider converting some lots to park. I mean, certainly these meetings are an opportunity to listen to comments and concerns from the neighborhood, and this is just the beginning of the development application process. So I'm not a representative of Mattamy. I can't say whether or not they'll go through with it, but this is certainly just the start of the development approval process. So I don't know if anyone from Mattamy wanted to jump in and add to that.
I think the one thing, and I'm not from Mattamy, I'm from Foten, but the one thing we have seen in the past is where that stone cottage is, there is some additional land. And if there is a need, and because this is a private development, if there is a need and people are finding within the community that they want to have, and you're talking more of a tot park, you're not talking a big field because kids that are using the big fields and the big parks are, you know, capable of going for a bit of a longer walk. If you're looking for a younger family, sort of smaller play space, there might be space to do something where that stone cottage is, where you add a swing set and a small little outdoor area where people can get that little bit of exercise. Like, it is a private development, and so there's nothing stopping people in the future who will all own part of that, a percentage of that, to, you know, raise some money, put in a park. Maybe Mattamy will do it, but at the end of the day, there is opportunities in there without necessarily creating a new public park. Because it is fenced in, chances of anybody outside of the neighborhood working their way to that back corner is less likely, but a small little refuge area within the development is a possibility. And I think, as Nico said, you raise really good points, and that might be something from this meeting we take back and we tweak and look at. And we've definitely noted it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, like I say, I back onto that area, and I'm pretty familiar with how far away the stone cottage is from the back fence. It's really not that big. And if you put a play structure of some kind, then yeah, it would be appropriate for small children that would have difficulty making the walk around to the Campobello Park or down to the water park. Would be more difficult for them to make it that far. And like I say, there's some nice trees there, because I did notice on the tree conservation, there's really not that many that are being saved. There's the majority of them are being taken down, which is sad to see. So it's disappointing.
Thanks, Ally. So yeah, the tree conservation report's reviewed in-house as well by city foresters. So we'll provide comments back to Mattamy and Foten as part of the circulation process regarding the tree conservation report. And if you've provided me comments as well regarding trees, they'll be sent on, all the public comments will be summarized anonymously and sent on to Foten and Mattamy for their review and consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Ally.
Yep.
All right, next to Kim, please.
Hi.
Hi, Kim.
My main concern of this plan would be the 3 stories. I also have a backyard neighboring these properties. I'm just wondering if there's a reason they went with 3-story towns instead of the 2 stories, when basically 100% of everything that surrounds this is 2 stories.
So, Nico, you want to take it?
Sure. I mean, I can't speak to Mattamy's specific choices, but Mattamy does have certain models that will say fit in better for a particular type of development or layout. Certainly in terms of perhaps homes that are directly abutting the site, you'd be looking at 2 stories, but certainly in the Fairwinds community, I would be able to point to several examples of 3-story towns. So I would say that it's certainly not breaking new ground in the Fairwinds community. And certainly from a policy perspective, 3 stories are very much permitted and do provide quite an efficient use of the lands. Keep in mind the low-rise building height in the official plan and the applicable policies, you can go up to 4 stories. So it's certainly not what Mattamy is proposing. From 2 to 3 stories certainly is still considered to be low-rise.
Yeah, just jump in and say, just if you go further west on Maple Grove, just past the property, we do have 3-story village homes throughout Fairwinds. And part of the logic with going with the 3 stories, I mean, as people are mentioning, the possibility of blasting or rock removal, and part of our thought process here is going with slab on grade units, not having a basement, so being able to offer a product with similar square footage while reducing the amount of rock removal, especially in proximity to the other homes. and also the back-to-back. I mean, it's again, similar product that appears in other areas of Fairwinds, and it's also a great affordable option. You know, I think we're all faced with the affordability crisis in the city, and back-to-backs are really popular for people starting out, first home or young family. So it's something, you know, we're happy to provide a product that people, you know, can get in 2 and 3 bedroom. That's more affordable than the typical towns and singles.
Do you not need to also dig for slab on grade construction?
Yep, there'd be a little bit, certainly to place footings, but it's not the same as removing material for a full basement, because you're not going to a full height. Typically, it'd be around maybe 1.5 meters the depth of a footing, depending on the elevation of the rock. Whereas a full basement, you could be going 2 meters down or more.
To follow up on that, I realize the zoning permits the 4 stories, and there's other 3 stories in the neighborhood. That said, for the most part in the neighborhood, 3 stories aren't usually typically looking down on people's backyards. They're usually face to face. So that's the issue for me, is they're going to be peering down into our homes and into our backyards from their 3rd floor.
I would say that perhaps not in Fairwinds per se, but in other examples around the city, there are these conditions. Keep in mind, in terms of the overlook, you're looking at 2 rear yards that are going to be separated by a fence, number 1, and number 2, by a rear yard setback. Right now, we're proposing at least 7 meters, and in many cases more than that. So that will certainly help in terms of issues of privacy and overlook.
A 7-meter rear yard is definitely a plus. That said, if you look at the plan for block 28, they basically have the side of the 3-story town directly in their backyard.
Right. I would say, at least in terms of the zoning, that is something that actually would be permitted, where an interior side yard can be much smaller. And I'm sure there can be some design considerations that can be looked at. I don't want to set anything in stone, but for instance, perhaps having less windows along that facade. That'll be something that can certainly be looked at moving forward. But at least from a zoning perspective, and also in terms of other conditions around the city, I would say that this is not a unique situation.
Okay, what about, sun shadow study? If you think about this 3-story wall, even though there's no windows, they're going to be blocking a lot of, light in the wintertime.
I would suggest that a sun shadow study would, the city would never require such a study for a low-rise building height. You only start to see that for high mid-rise buildings, if not high-rise buildings. So several further stories up. In terms of shadowing, will there be an impact? I'm sure, yes, there will be a little bit of an impact. But we are looking at several conditions that are similar around the city. And some that are much worse in terms of sun shadowing as well. So I guess all this to say that no, it's not perfect, but I think it's a condition that you already see in the city, including in the suburbs, and that you're probably going to start seeing more and more as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Next is Hasber.
Yeah, hi. How are you guys doing? Good evening, everyone. First of all, you can hear me, right? I'm not on mute anymore. Okay. Okay, so first of all, thank you for organizing today's evening event, and thanks for giving us a chance to ask the questions. So I really have 4 questions, and I will try to ask them in a format that could be answered together. So I own a property on Pampero Crescent. First of all, I just wanted to kind of confirm what Connor had mentioned. So the construction is not starting till summer of 2022, and the first dwelling that you guys are expecting is not before summer of 2023. That's just a confirmation there. Number two is, maybe I read it wrong when the email came out, but is there going to be any kind of commercial establishment there as well? For example, bank, store, or mall, something along that line. Number three is that, as I said, I am a property owner there, and I appreciate you communicating through email for most of the communication, if not all. But the concerns that are brought up is the vibration related and whatever. So if any communication is to be made, I would really appreciate if email communication, in addition to if something is to be dropped off by my tenant, that's fine, but the email communication, because I won't be able to go and check every day. So if any kind of notification that needs to be given, if that could be emailed out as well. And since Nico seems to have the plan in front of him, as I mentioned, I have a property at Pampero, and the area that's being developed in, my house actually backs into that area. I just wanted to get an understanding as that right across, right to the back of Pampero Crest, and I believe there's only 2 or 3 houses there anyways. The townhouses that you mentioned, they're all going to be 3 stories, I believe. So if they're going to back in, or this is like going to be front to back, I don't know how to put it in terms, but I hope you understand. So those are my questions for the time being. Thank you.
So I can certainly tackle a couple of the questions, and I'll let I can let Connor or Laurel chime in terms of construction timelines and communications with you. The 2 questions, as I recall, that at least I can answer.
Yes.
Number 1 was the commercial aspect. Yes, there that would be specific only to the Heritage House close to Maple Grove, and we've proposed a limited number of small scale commercial uses that would have a relatively low impact, and we'd argue a benefit to the surrounding community. Any kind of commercial use would have to adapt to the Heritage House. So they can't just tear it down and build a big new building. They'll be restricted by the existing building that's on the lands. In terms of your second question, with respect to, I guess, the orientation of the townhouses, if you have a house on Pampero, the rear yards of those units would back onto the sidewalls of buildings. The sidewalls of townhouses, either that or a small private roadway with a bit of a landscape buffer between the roadway and the fence. So it wouldn't be back to back in those locations. It would be back to side. And yes, they are 3 stories throughout the development.
And Nico, sorry to interrupt you there. So you mentioned there's going to be a 7-meter distance. So right now there's some fence already put in. So the 7 meters starts from the fence that's already existing, and then there's going to be the other fence, or is it going to be 7? Just wishful thinking here. 7 and then plus 7 and then the fence. How does that work?
No, just 1 7. So
okay.
And that's along the east and west property lines. There are locations where, especially along the north lot line, that it won't be 7 meters. You'll have the sides of buildings that'll be closer to that fence.
Okay.
But certainly the 7 meters that I was talking about was the minimum rear yard that we'll be proposing for the east and west edges, 7 meters from the fence.
Okay.
That answered all your questions?
So I had 2 more just to confirm the timelines. I think I saw Connor nodding his head. I think I'm good. So I basically was asking if 2022 is the beginning of construction, and 2023 is summer. Sorry, 2022 summer, beginning of construction, 2023 summer, beginning of dwelling of people actually starting to live there. Would that be correct, Connor?
Yeah, so that's the current plan.
Okay. And Laurel, as I just mentioned, if it's possible to actually make sure the communications, like, even the day before, a couple of days before, if a notice is given to the current occupant who is my tenant right now, if it could be kind of emailed out as well. I don't know if there's any other medium like giving me a call or whatnot. I will definitely share my information with you. But it would be really beneficial for me to look out for. I have a very good tenant. He's going to look after the property, but I'm the owner. I have to be a bit more vigilant about the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have emailed me, and I'm just going back to make sure if you're on my email list.
Yep.
You,
and that's
yeah,
why
I think.
Invite. Yep.
Yeah. So I think you were. So anything that will come from the city from now on regarding planning committee, any updates? So let's say Mattamy, when Mattamy and FO10 submit their second submission, I'll update everyone on my contact list who has sent me an email to say the second submission is received. You can find the documents here. So now that you've emailed me, I'll continue emailing you as well. So nothing might really go to the tenant anymore. That's just at the beginning of the process.
Yeah.
Now that you've contacted me via email, I'll be emailing you.
Okay.
It's really unlikely I'm going to phone you. So, or any other medium that I don't know of. I'm not really like telepathic, but you can email me and I will email you back for sure.
For sure. Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
No problem. Okay.
And thank you, Nico, as well.
Thanks. Tanya, you've been patiently waiting. It is your turn.
Oops. Thank you. I don't have the application documents in front of me, but it occurred to me that 4 access points for development of this size is a little bit more than typical. Could you tell me just a ballpark of the distance between each access point along Maple Grove?
I'm pulling up the plan here.
I can go ahead and do that. I have it up here.
Oh,
So,
okay, great.
I guess, I don't know how the easiest way to describe this is. You're looking at approximately, I have it, so going from east to west, you will sort of have 23 meters road. Then you would have the road loops, the road loop around, and 31 meters later, you would have the next break. The roads themselves are, because they're atypical road, we're still working on the cross sections of them because they're private streets. So they range in width between 12 meters and 7.1. 3 of them are 7.1. The one closest to the Heritage Building is slightly wider. So then you would have, so we've got 25 meters road, 31 meters road, 30 meters road, 30 meters road, and then you're at 25 meters to the edge of the property, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I'll add some perspective to that too. Just if you were in within a normal subdivision, local roads would be minimum spacing of 30 meters as well. So this is pretty, even if it wasn't a private site and these were local roads, that's the type of spacing that you'd likely encounter.
Thank you.
Was that it, Tanya? Just the one?
Yes.
You were so patient. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, Kim has another question, so we'll turn it back over to Kim. And then there's just some questions that we've received privately, so we'll turn to those, and then we'll wrap up by 8, it looks like. So Kim, your questions, please.
It's mostly, I guess, follow-up comments on previous people's questions. Ali mentioned if it was possible to revise the plan at all. For the most part, what keeps coming up is these 4 streets. Andrew did mention that it wasn't abnormal for people to get glare in their homes. I just wanted to mention this is basically expected in people's front yards, but if you're considering the 4 blocks in the back and all the headlights that are going to be glaring in their backyards in their main living space, I feel like a revised plan with more of a crescent type street and maybe backyard against backyard layout would, be more in keeping with the neighborhood, even adding sidewalks, because there's no sidewalks. Be more in keeping with the flavor in the neighborhood, I guess.
I'll just take it quickly, and then I don't know if Nico or Lisa have anything to weigh in. So what we'll do from here is I haven't given a set of comments yet to FOTEN regarding the circulation. So I'm still waiting to hear from several internal departments, such as transportation, such as engineering, with any of their concerns from their review of the plans. And I still have to do my own more thorough review as well. And we'll provide those back to FOTEN and Mattamy, and again, along with a summary of public comments. And they'll take that back and discuss with their team to see what's feasible regarding changes. So, they've obviously heard that, you guys have some issues with the 4 access points. There's issues with height. So they'll take that back and they'll take it under advisement. I can't speak for them, if they're going to make any changes, and, they're welcome to comment on this after. And then when they submit their second submission, that's when you'll see if any changes have been made.
Okay.
So I don't want to put, FOTEN or Mattamy on the spot just because they haven't received the city's comments yet. We're not done with our review. And Councillor Gower always provides pretty good, shouldn't put you on the spot either. He provides comments as well. And those will be included in our circulation comments. So I don't know if FOTEN or Mattamy, you don't have to answer, but that's kind of how the process will go from here.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that typically in a situation, if we have rear yards facing a road, like such as you're mentioning, like from the rear yards on Pampero, we do our best to put in a privacy fence and maybe some cedars, like some fairly thick vegetation to screen the headlights as much as possible. That's definitely something that we think about, and you'll see in the plans it shows landscape buffers.
I did notice there's a retaining wall up there, so I'm not sure how much higher that's going to be from the existing.
There may be some retaining walls around. I'm not sure what specific location you're looking, but depending on how the rear yard's tied together, at some locations it's I think up to 0.5 meters, but I'm not sure what specific location you're asking about.
Basically around the whole site against all the existing houses. I'm just looking at the grading plan.
For sure, yeah, it ranges in height. I don't have it in front of me, but we're still in the process of flushing that out. Obviously, we'd like as much as possible to tie in and avoid retaining walls, but at some locations it's unavoidable, especially around the heritage buildings, which of course can't be moved. So retaining walls would be required.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, Kathleen has a question, and then we'll probably have to end the Q&A in the name of time, just because I have a few questions here that we've received. So Kathleen, you can go ahead too.
Unmute. Okay. Well, I think the question was just answered. The question was the retaining wall behind the stone cottage. How high is it? I back on there, and that house is pretty high. So I don't need an 8-foot retaining wall.
So yeah,
I guess they don't know.
Connor, sorry, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I can get back to you and take a look at that, but it's not going to be 8 feet.
You know what I mean? I don't mean 8 feet, but.
Yeah, no, from what I remember, it's going to be around 0.5 meter, I think.
Okay.
Creating, it's, if you want to call it like a slight bowl around that stone cottage.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Okay, so just in the chat there, we had received some questions regarding transportation. So I put them in the chat for everyone to see. They're mostly for Andrew to answer. So I'll just read them out, and Andrew, if you can provide a pretty brief response, if you can, that would be great. So number 1, will the Crescent roads have stop signs at the intersection of Maple Grove Road?
Yes, a normal private approach you'd see any condo or any type of specific site. Yeah.
Perfect. Oh dear, number
Just to
two.
be clear, Andrew, on that, because I think the direction is not going to be, the stop will be on the private road. Maple Grove will be not have a stop. It won't be a full intersection. It'll just be the streets coming out that have the stops. Just want to clarify that.
Correct.
Good clarification. Two, is the parking sufficient for these homes, or will we see cars parked on Maple Grove? We need to consider that based on 90+ homes and an average home having 2 cars, we are looking at additional 180 cars.
The parking, each place is going to have its own parking, from what I understand on your product. So the garage and the driveway, and we do have visitor parking allocated in the plan in a few spots. At this time, it depends on how we sort out those crescent roads that the number of visitor parking will be able to permit. But I would say within the site, it looks good right now. If there was some people parking on Maple Grove, I would actually suggest that's a benefit given the wide nature of Maple Grove Road. The speeds you'd be seeing on Maple Grove are actually a product of the size of the pavement structure from curb to curb along that roadway. Wider pavement, faster speeds. So if you have some cars parked on there, it introduces a little bit of side friction, may hopefully slow cars down. Saying that, I'm not saying we're going to overflow onto Maple Grove, but there actually may be some benefits if there's an occasional car parked there off and on.
Laurel, it's Councillor Glenn here. I just wanted to add, because this comes up a lot. I don't have the latest study on what the actual average number of cars are per home in Stittsville, but it is actually lower than 2. I know some people are surprised to hear that. We've actually asked the city for some more updated studies, but we believe in areas where there are townhomes, especially smaller townhomes, the average number of vehicles is a lot lower than it would be for, say, a single family home or a larger 3 or 4 bedroom townhome. Anyhow, I just wanted to mention that, but I do realize that there is a lot of concern about parking requirements, in particular in some of the neighborhoods and streets with townhomes, because although there's often a garage and a driveway, sometimes that garage isn't quite big enough for cars or is being used for other things. But anyhow, the average number of cars per homes in Stittsville is actually not anywhere close to 2. It's lower than that. More than 1, but less than 2 per home.
I would just like to further that with, we're starting to see there's been a huge problem in older subdivisions with on-street parking and overflow parking, and people are now, the benefits of transit are starting to play a little bit of into it now, and you're starting to see people with less cars and realizing that they're not multiple car households anymore. You're starting to see the transition in that. It might not happen across the city, but you're seeing a lot of the newer subdivisions with less cars in them because people are purchasing aware of the restrictions of parking, and also the spacing between driveways and such. Allowing for on-street parking is something the city has been working on to make sure that if there is on-street parking available, it's not driveway space driveway. You're getting more gaps between driveways to allow the on-street parking to happen, so you don't have the overflows around outside of it. So just a further on that, we're starting to see the trend change because people are making those choices a little bit more less car dependent, especially with the smaller size houses, like with the stacked townhouses, this back-to-back, you're getting younger families where maybe 1 car is doable. You're not getting the family with 4 teenage drivers locating in those types of units.
Great, thanks. I'm just for the sake of time, I'm just going to ask one more question that's not related to transportation, but I think I can answer it. And just the question was, Mattamy, would you consider redesigning the product to do 2 stories instead of 3? I think they've understood the concerns from members of the public, so they'll take that back as part of the feedback from this meeting. And we'll see what their response is with their resubmission. That being said, those 3 stories are permitted. It's not a huge grade change here. So I don't know if we share all of the same concerns on that, but Mattamy, the city and Pro-10 have definitely heard your concerns. So I think I'll wrap it up there. It's 8:02. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, Councillor Gower, representatives from Pro-10 and Mattamy, as well as all of the residents. Again, if you haven't reached out to me, please do so via email or mail so that I can add you to the notification list. And once we receive the second submission, I'll do an email blast to everyone to let you know that it's in and where you can review the documents. And just one thing that I don't want to forget to add, and I can put it in the link as well. The transportation master plan is currently being updated. And because I understand there are a lot of issues and concerns with Maple Grove Road, I'll put the link in the chat before we close it and then nobody can get it. And you can also Google it. It's on the city's website. It's a very interesting and important update that's taking place and it affects many of you in Stittsville. So please take a look at that when you have some spare time. Okay, so I think we're done for the night. If you guys have any questions that weren't answered today, please feel free to send them to me and I will pass them on to Mattamy and Pro-10, or if I can answer them, I'd be happy to do so. There's my email for those of you who don't have it. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Laurel.
Thanks.